I'm Jeff from Counting Outs, and today I'm going to teach you all about wraps in Pot-Limit Omaha. So why are wraps important? Having 4 hole cards means that most PLO hands are won by straights or better, so knowing the value of your straight draws is essential. It will also give you an edge against most low-stakes Omaha players who are misinformed and haven't taken the time to learn about wraps. Quickly recognizing wraps and counting your outs should be second nature if you want to be a profitable poker player. Instead of spending your time at the table understanding the board, you can use all of your mental energy on strategic decisions. First, let's quickly cover some basics. An out is any unseen card that will give you the best hand. Knowing the number of outs you have will help you calculate your chances of winning. A wrap is a straight draw with 9 or more outs. You might be used to no limit hold'em, where the most straight outs possible is 8, but in Omaha, you have twice as many hole cards and straight draws can have as many as 20 outs. To have a wrap, your hole cards should wrap around the board cards. Wrapping the board can mean your hole cards are above, below, and in between the board cards, but you must use at least 2 board cards and use at least 3 of the cards in your hand. Only consider hole cards as part of your wrap when they are directly next to the board cards or up to 3 cards in your hand are adjacent to each other. In this example, the 4 in your hand is next to the 3 on the board. You can also include the 5 and the 6 because they are next to the 4, but you can't include the 7 because it's more than 3 away. Also, don't include hole cards that pair the board as part of your wrap. In this example, you have a 2 in the hole that matches the 2 on the board, so that shouldn't be included when counting your outs. There are 2 main ways to count your wrap outs. You can count them manually in your head or on your fingers, or you can memorize the different wrap structures. We'll review each of these in detail, and I'll share some tips to quickly estimate your outs at the end of this video. To count outs in your head, look at the board and see which cards need to come that will give you a straight. For each number card you need that matches a number in your hand, then count 3 outs. This is because you already have one of the 4 suits, so there are only 3 remaining suits possible. In this example, there are 3 2s, 3 3s, and 3 6s left in the deck to make you a straight. For each card you need not matching a number in your hand, then count 4 outs. That's because all suits are still available. In this case, an ace or a 7 will each make you a straight, and each one you can count 4 outs. So now we can add 4 aces, 3 2s, 3 3s, 3 6s, and 4 7s for a grand total of 17 outs. When counting your outs, in some cases you also need to adjust for ace high and ace low straights. If any wrap includes an ace, either on the board or in your hand, and would complete a straight if an additional theoretical card existed above an ace high straight or below an ace low straight, then you cannot count those outs for non-existent cards. So in this example, a 10, a jack, or a queen would each give you a straight. But unlike straights with middle cards, there are no straight outs above the board. There's nothing above an ace here, so you can't count this one. Now that you understand how to count outs in your head, let's look at the 5 main wrap structures that you should consider memorizing. There are minor variations of most of these wrap structures, but I'm going to cover the easiest ones to recognize, and I'll share some tips to help you identify wraps at the end of the video. The first wrap structure is the 9-out wrap, also known as the inner wrap. Here, all 3 hole cards are between the 2 board cards. This is easy to remember because all 3 of your cards line up in a row. Since we know that each of our hole cards has 3 other suits to account for, it's 3 plus 3 plus 3, which equals 9 outs. This wrap is probably the easiest to identify. The second type of wrap is the 13-out wrap. I like to think of this as the one-sider. Here, 3 hole cards are wrapping either above or below the 2 board cards, but not both. They're all on one side. So you can see we have a jack, queen, and king in our hand, and each one of those is worth 3. They're all lined up. And then if a card falls below the board on the other side here, then that's worth 4. So that gives us a grand total of 13 outs. Again, this is another easy one to recognize that you should memorize. Here's another variation of that same wrap, where the middle cards have just switched places. So instead of our 3 hole cards being in a row, there's a gap between one, but they're still skewed towards the right side, or in other cases skewed towards the left side of the board cards. They're not evenly distributed. Again, same number of outs, 4 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 13 outs. The third type of wrap is the 17-out wrap. I like to think of this as the two-sider. So the last wrap we looked at, all the cards were skewed on one side of the board. Here, our cards are spread out on both sides, which gives us additional outs. We have 3 hole cards that wrap both above and below the board cards. Each of our hole cards, we get to count 3 outs. And for cards to come that don't match our hole cards, we can count 4 outs on either side of the wrap. So our grand total is 17 outs. Let's look at another variation. Here, our middle card just moved 1 over so that we have a gap between the 8 and the 10. But we still have the same number of outs overall. 4 on the sides where the needed card to come doesn't match anything in our hand. For each of the cards in our hand, where we still need a card, we can count 3. So 4, 3, 3, 3, and 4 gives us a total of 17 still. The fourth type of wrap is the 16-out wrap. I like to refer to this as the one-sided monster. So here we jump from using 3 hole cards to 4 hole cards, and they're wrapped both above and below the 2 or 3 board cards, but they're balanced on one side. This is similar to the 13-out wrap, which used 3 of our hole cards, but in this case we use 4 of our hole cards, which gives us 3 extra outs. The 4 hole cards are wrapped on both sides of the board cards, but they're still balanced on one side. This structure is fairly easy to remember as well, because you've got all 3 cards lumped together with 1 card below the board cards, for a total of 16 outs. Now there's another variation that's similar, where we use all 4 of our hole cards. They're still skewed, but there's a different gap in the middle here. Again, this gives us 16 outs. Lastly, we have the 20-out wrap, which I like to think of as the two-sided monster. People call this the world, the mother of all wraps, and really, almost every card to come is going to give you a straight, so you're usually in great shape. Similar to the last wrap we looked at, the 16-out wrap, which was one-sided and cards were skewed to either side of the board, here they're pretty evenly balanced. And what that does is it gives you an extra 4 wrap outs. So you have wrap outs on either side of all your hole cards, but you can also count 3 outs for each of your hole cards, for a grand total of 20 outs. Now, as long as your hole cards are balanced against the board, there can be subtle variations to this, where here there's a gap, and you can see that our hole cards are still pretty evenly spread on both sides of the board. Now that we've reviewed the main types of wraps, here are some tips for quickly estimating your outs. If there's not an ace in the wrap, when using 2 of your cards, you have 8 outs, similar to what you're used to in No Limit Hold'em with an open-ended straight draw, which isn't technically a wrap. And when using 3 of your cards in Pot-Limit Omaha, you have at least 9 outs, and that's the first straight draw that's technically a wrap. When using all 4 of your cards, you have at least 16 outs. And when you wrap around both sides of the board, you have more outs, especially if you're balanced in the middle. But my advice is to memorize the easy wrap structures first. The 9-out inner wrap is very easy to remember, as all 3 of your hole cards are in between the 2 board cards. And the 13-out one-sider wrap is also easy to remember. So what's next? One very important concept I didn't cover in this video is how to play your wraps. In order to make profitable decisions, you should first learn the difference between nut wraps and sucker wraps, and focus on counting those outs that will turn your hand into the nuts. To learn more winning Pot-Limit Omaha strategies, visit countingouts.com and subscribe on YouTube for future videos.